information, but I'll start with just talking a little bit about what we do with this 3x4 genetics test. And one of the things that you started with, Michelle, that I love, that self-care is a discipline. Indeed. And so one of the things that I find that these genetic tests do is really, I know they do, is help us focus on what are the priorities here for this person as an individual. Forget standard of care. When we have this information, then we are able to, and also obviously listening to the patient's story and what's going on with them, are able then to identify what are going to be their priorities for health. And what makes the 3x4 genetics test really brilliant from my perspective, because I have been using genetic testing in my practice for probably about 3 years. And 2 years ago, I happened upon 3x4, and I'd used some other great tools. But how things are evolving is like the earlier tools just looked at single genetic variants or single gene SNPs, and would give people recommendations for healthcare in relationship to those different SNPs. And but sometimes if you had a number of SNPs you were looking at, that information could be contradictory. And so what I feel like is brilliant about the 3x4, number one, it was put together by nutritionists and a good science team, but they are looking at these SNPs, like 131 different genes, and they're looking at them in pathways of how we function. And so for metabolic pathways. And so let me just pop us into and take a look at pathways here. And so again, here are like the 30, actually, I think there's 34 different pathways of what we look at in regards to a person's function. So here, the story becomes very individualized. I mean, genetically, we really are so similar, but actually we are incredibly unique. And so where we start within these pathways is looking at cellular health. These are foundational. The methylation, inflammation, oxidative stress, detoxification. These are core cellular processes that if we're not getting these right, if we haven't supported the best expression of these pathways, then we are never going to be able to to support the health of all these other pathways that we also look at in this report. And so, and Michelle, you were talking about methylated supplementation. So this is I don't know if we didn't see the front of it. So this report is actually kind of a made up report for gene pool. It's kind of a tongue in cheek, right? Gene pool. So, but when we look at, for this person and what I look at it is like, oh, I can see that they're probably their top 3 priorities. And that's what we are going to always look at, is what are going to be out of these 34 different pathways, what are going to be the top priorities for them. And so for this particular person, it would be methylation, the pathways of methylation. And so then secondary would be glucose and insulin. And then thirdly would be female hormone balance. And I know from the work that I've done with these for the last couple of years that this is a great place to start, but it always is related to what is being expressed with the person. So we have to have the time to listen to the story of what's going on with you. And so when we're looking at that expression, we're looking at symptoms. We're looking at some of like the testing that you're talking about, the nutrient testing to see what's going on. There's a lot of different tests that people can do, but initially it's just looking at how they're feeling, what are their health goals, and what's their lifestyle like. And so when it comes to, and maybe I should get more specific to gut health, because you can see as we look here for pathways, we actually don't in this test have a pathway that is specific to gut health. And initially when I started doing this, it's like, how come we don't have a gut health? Are we going to have a gut health? When are we going to have a gut health pathway? But the bottom line is, it is so complex, the gut is. And so I'm going to switch out. Let's see if I'll pull up another I'm going to have to stop sharing to pull up this other one and then start sharing. Sorry. Okay. So we should be looking at personalized lifestyle interventions for optimal gut health slide. Yeah. And so, and I felt like this is a good one just to share, because if we have a healthy intestinal tract, it is going to affect all the aspects of our health. We know that. And like Michelle was saying, 80% of our immune system is basically supported and created within the gut, within the dynamics of gut health. And so it's important to really refine this and get it right. And so the other slide, a couple other slides here, I think that are important, is just looking at the, what is the gastrointestinal tract? And it's like from the oral teeth, like Michelle was talking about, all the way through the rectum and the anus, and all of these organs in between are all part of the gastrointestinal system. So very important and complex dynamics within all these tissues and cells. And when we break down, for example, just looking at in the colon, the different types of cells that are there and the different processes that are going on, they are complex. The science within the health of the, and I'll switch to a couple more, the health and the function of these, the gastrointestinal tract is really amazing. I mean, it's when we think about how we adapt to what is going on in our life and in our environment, this is key right here within these processes. And I won't go into that all tonight, but when we look at how do we use like the 3x4, and why do we not have a gut health pathway? It's because when we look at everything that's going on, and we're going to look at a lot of the different pathways that are within the 3x4. So for the epithelial cell support, which is a big part of healing the gut, then we are going to be looking at the core top cellular processes that I spoke of that are foundational, and then including histamine. And then, for example, a little bit below the epithelial, we're looking at the endothelial cells. And so we also look at vascular system, glucose and insulin, and then connective tissue. So I'm now going to take us back to the report, and we'll take a look there. Let me grab that again. Sorry about the pause, too many clicks. Okay, so here we are again, should be. And so when I take a look at this, because I've been spending a lot of time at this over the past couple of years, I mean, I'm going to go back here into looking at all of these genes within the pathway. And so within these cellular functions, it's like, oh yeah, methylation. I want to see exactly what's going on here with the different genes that support methylation for this person. And then also in inflammations, like I could have 5 people be looking at 5 different reports and have methylation under cellular be their number 1 area to focus on as a priority. But if I look here within these gene variations, the story is going to be different for everyone, which makes working with this tool absolutely fascinating. So when it comes to supporting a person for their gut health, then it really is, again, listening to their story. What are they dealing with? And then that is going to help us when we look at these pathways, and then just try to identify and then prioritize where do we start. And so let's take a look here on the summary plan. And so again, what's very supportive with the 3x4, and again, as Michelle said at the beginning, it's like self-care is a discipline. So when you begin to identify what the priorities for this person is for their health and helping them optimize their health, it's like, oh, you get it right here. You get the information that says this personalized to you. It's like, this is what's going to be a priority for you. And sometimes when I'll look at a report and I will write up notes for a patient because they get the whole report, but then I will, in our consultation about it, then we talk about what's going on for them. and what are we going to prioritize? And so I will give them that information, and I can tell them, I can tell, like, for this person, that methylation is always going to be a consideration for them for their health, period. Usually the cellular issues are, because again, if you are able to fine tune and support the expression of the cellular pathways, then you're going to be able to affect everything else downstream, because cellular is so upstream. And so with this report, throughout all of the priority suggestions, they're always going to be looking at food. And Michelle, I am right there with you and talking about food. It's like, we have to get the best quality that we can for our food. And we are lucky in our areas that we have, many people are doing their own gardening, but we also have the CSAs and community supported agricultures and farmers markets, so we can get some really great quality food. And it's really important to avoid the GMO foods. And I could go on for hours talking about that too, because of the environmental health conferences I've been to and listening to the researchers, that research that's not making it to mainstream press. But if you're, we have to avoid genetically modified foods and the pest, and keep as organic as possible. Totally detrimental to our gut health. But so see, I can get on soapboxes for sure. So, okay, so food, important. And then looking at lifestyle, and that's the thing I really appreciate about 3x4 is that, they get it. It's like, it's what's going on in a person's life. How do we decrease stress? How do we avoid toxins in the environment? And because we know by research, it's like how those things are going to be affecting different pathways. And for stress and toxins in the environment and methylation are going to be key in being able to optimize the methylation pathway, which is going to be very supportive for and important for gut health. And then it also will look at, what might be the best types of supplements that will be supportive for this person. So, all of them are going to be like that. Glucose and insulin, this would be kind of like a second tier if I was looking at gut health for the person, but it's going to be also dependent on what their story is. It's like, what's their hemoglobin A1C? Is it meeting like the functional medicine criteria, like that 5.5 or less? What other potential concerns are they having here? And female hormone balance, that was not so much wouldn't be a concern with the gut health. Again, we would be going back and looking at, you can see there's a lot of information in these reports.
So Toni, one of the questions that came up is what is methylation and what is oxidation? Okay. And how do those metabolic functions, what are they and why are they important?
Well, and methylation, as it says here, is a process by how, methylation is like, so it's core importance. And so it's a process by how we make new DNA, and it's how we make sure that every cell is functioning optimally. And especially in regards to B vitamins, they're like cofactors for the methylation process in the cell. And so we need to have that right so that the cellular processes are fine-tuned and so that we can make new DNA, that there's not going to be any deficits in that process. And so because methylation itself, and here, it explains, it says it's a process that, it turns on our genes, it's instructions for our genes, and it turns them off too. And so it's important for basically every function in our body, whether we're looking at making energy through the mitochondria or how we respond to stress, how we handle inflammation. And, these things right here are totally critical to gut health. And then also looking at how do we detoxify and how does our brain chemistry work, especially when we're looking at brain chemistry. So hopefully that answers that question. And oxidative stress, oh my gosh, whenever that comes up in somebody's report, for me, it's like, okay, we got to talk about balance. We're talking about balance, like biochemically within the cell, as well as in the lifestyle. Because oxidative stress is like what they call the equivalent of human rusting. And and we have so many things that are happening in our lives, and from just being stressed at work or at home or with COVID. I mean, we've had a lot of stressors, and those stresses can then change these intercellular processes that actually increase oxidation and cell death, basically. And so it's really important to be able to, especially if it comes up as a priority in a person's chart, to really be able to look at that and focus at them. For this person, it did not come up as a priority. And so this is where, when I work with people, what I'm doing is, again, listening to their story and seeing what else, what other additional information needs to be added to support them with their health. So, and what I found, over and over again that keeps me using is number one, people get better because it gives them their personalized support and instruction on how to support their genes and their gene pathways optimally. Because our DNA, our genes don't change. But the things that we do within our life, all of our choices that are going to affect our health, because they affect the expression of our genes. So I just find it's a remarkable tool to help people with health overall and optimizing their health. And it really helps people with that discipline for self-care. I mean, if it's like, okay, these are going to be the top 3 things that I'm going to do now, and then be consistent with that. And then you're able to see that you're getting good support for your health overall. And we just keep fine tuning it. And because again, like I said, I've been using this for a couple of years in practice. And so with my patients, it's like, we can come back to it another, a year later. And it's like, and what's going on with them? It's like, well, let's look at your pathways. Let's see what's important here. And it helps to identify maybe other testing that we should and could be doing, as well as other interventions for lifestyle support too. So it's a deep dive.
It is. And what I want everybody to understand is that it sounds really complex, but really what we're talking about is, yes, you're born with a specific genetic makeup, and yours might be similar to your sister's, and obviously it comes from your mom and your dad. But when we talk about gene expression, a lot of people focus on the gene that is specific to breast cancer. And just because you're born with that gene doesn't mean it has to be turned on. It doesn't have to be expressed.
Correct. That's so important. And so
right?
What I'll share here is like what these genes that are used, and here's just some pictures of, some of them. It's like these, when we look at them in pathways, these are what we call low penetrance genes. These are not the ones that say, oh, you've got this, so that means you have a potential to get cancer. No. That's like, these are the ones in their pathways that can turn on the switch for the genes that you're talking about And so the polygenic low penetrance, big words, but it's like, these are the ones that turn on and off those genes. So it's important work. Yeah.
And that's really important because the bottom line is we all want to avoid the big C, right? The big C is such a scary, scary situation. And we all know, we all have family members, we all have really close friends that have been diagnosed with a variety of cancers. But that doesn't mean that we have to succumb to that. And these kinds of tests, whether it's micronutrient testing or this wonderful 3x4 genetics test, it gives you some answers so that you can make choices. So you have the choice as to whether or not you're going to exercise differently. And that's the other thing that the 3x4 shows, is it actually shows your tolerance for different types of exercise. Right. Or even do you metabolize caffeine very well? Do you metabolize salt very well? And so all of these little key components give you, again, tools so that you can make choices for yourself. So going forward, you can potentially reverse some acute medical issues or even chronic medical issues. Because what I don't succumb to, and what I really absolutely do not subscribe to, is the whole idea of, oh, honey, you're just getting older. I just think that's a cop out. That's not actually figuring out what is going on. So when you go to your healthcare practitioner and you have this laundry list of symptoms, you're tired, your skin doesn't feel well, you're gaining weight, you don't sleep very well, and you're having horrible hot flashes. Those are all very key concerns. Oh, and if you have cravings, oh my gosh, who doesn't have cravings? But that's what Toni's talking about, listening to your story and identifying what is really important to you, because obviously if you bring up those symptoms, they're very important to you. So through this test, what Toni's able to help you with is then identify what key components you're wanting to change. And then she can actually show you how to do that so that you can feel better sooner, rather than living with this and just have that laundry list of symptoms grow longer and longer and longer, which most of the time means more and more prescriptions, which don't necessarily always cure anything, but a lot of times add to your symptom list.
I would be in agreement with that. So, well, Michelle, that was great. I'm sold on the use of this test. And again, I've used other ones, and great work that, this is an exciting time in looking at genetics and being able to utilize it for health and wellness and longevity. And I just have found that this is the best test. And if people have interest in it, I'm in the process of just changing my practice. And so if you can look me up online, either by my name, but information as medicine, because that's what this is all about, is using information as medicine. And that is the future of real healing, I think. So
absolutely. And I think that's, Americans are having to advocate for themselves, because a lot of times we're just not getting the answers that we're looking for, and everybody's answer might be a little bit different. But I do really appreciate this test. I find that it just provides information that puts the control back in my court, that I get to make choices, I get to make decisions. And I think that's really important, because I think sometimes when we go in to see our healthcare practitioner, sometimes we come out with more questions than we got answers to. So, and I just, I've been a pharmacist for 34 years. I know a lot of people on this call have been pharmacists or practitioners for a very long period of time. And a lot of us are leaning more toward functional medicine because we're getting root-based answers. And so I can't thank you enough for joining us tonight, Toni. And again, Toni Marthaller, you can find her, you can Google Toni Marthaller and you can find her. She's out in Green Bank, which doesn't mean you necessarily have to take the drive, although the drive is spectacular. It's absolutely beautiful. But she also does quite a few Zoom meetings and, or I should say, telemedicine, because they're not all through Zoom. But there's a lot of information that you can get. And she also does some consulting with that. So it's not like she's just going to do this test, you're going to pay for the test, and here's your results, see you later. She's actually there to help hold your hand and help guide you to make the best decisions possible.
Oh, thanks, Michelle. Yeah,
absolutely.
All right. Well,
thank you so much, dear.
Pleasure to share. Yeah.
Well, and it's just really exciting stuff. It's, like I said, you get to do this on your own. You get to make all these decisions. So, but again, when we're talking about gut health, as we get older, we don't necessarily have the enzymes to digest our foods. So when we're talking about metabolic processes, like what Toni was specifically talking about, methylation, we need methylation processes to develop energy. And it's not just the desire to get out of bed in the morning and go exercise. It's really the energy to heal our bodies and move our bodies throughout the day. But digestive enzymes are those chemicals that are made in our stomachs and in our gallbladders, in part of our liver, to help break down our nutrients, break down our foods so that we can extract the nutrients out, which then become fuel sources so that our cells can actually work. And whether those cells are to build muscle, to build bone, to help move our blood, create new blood cells, those nutrients are really important in a wide variety of areas. So like the vitamin B6 is essential, mandatory in hundreds of different pathways. Magnesium is essential in over 400 pathways. So, but this test, especially the micronutrient testing and the 3x4 genetics, will actually show you what forms of some of these vitamins and nutrients that you can use so that we can support better health and better aging, so that we don't feel like we're 106 when we're only 66. So that's really important. Digestive enzymes are available over the counter. There are different types of digestive enzymes that do support different types of food breakdown. So whether we're dealing with carbohydrates, proteins, fats, all of those are very important. And what I will say is that some of the digestive enzymes that are actually produced in the stomach actually help us to reduce pain elsewhere in our bodies, like in our muscles and joints and bones. So next slide. This is just a couple of them. So the other thing I like to talk about is when we're dealing with skin, because really what's going on in our gut can manifest on our skin. So issues like psoriasis and eczema, those a lot of times have a gut root. So there could be something going on where we're not absorbing things appropriately. We might have something that's called leaky gut. And therefore, even just simple digestive products leak through the gaps in the digestive lining and end up on our skin, which can look like rashes. It can look like blisters. It can be funny red spots. They can itch, they can burn, they can flake and peel. But if we support our gut by using really good collagens, which are a form of protein, that actually can also build the building blocks of our cells in our skin. And our skin is not necessarily just on the outside, but the skin is also on the inside of the gut. Next slide. So with skin on the inside, we have to be really careful because stress can affect all of this. And when we're stressed, we tend to break down our foods differently. We tend to have more inflammation in our gut, but also throughout our body. It can definitely change our sleep cycle. And we tend to lean on foods and beverages that are supposed to calm and relax us, whether it's more caffeine, more salt, more chocolate, like sugar. Because the one thing that Toni touched on, as she mentioned, hemoglobin A1C. So that is a marker for whether or not you have diabetes or what could be classified as a pre-diabetic situation. And it's not just about sugar, but it's also about simple carbohydrates and alcohol. And we do use a lot of simple carbohydrates and alcohol when we're dealing with stress. But that also decreases our hydration because when we load up on carbohydrates, we tend to not absorb as much water. So our skin, whether it's inside our digestive tract, in the lining of our mouth, or even elsewhere on our bodies, tends to be drier and flakier, itchier, things like that. And all of this carbohydrate metabolism absolutely affects your sleep cycle. Sometimes it manifests in symptoms like night sweats or that 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock wake up call that you just can't get back to sleep. Sometimes that is not just a hormone issue, but can definitely be a cortisol level, which is another type of hormone. It's a stressor hormone and can be directly affected by our carbohydrates, which can then affect our blood glucose, or if we are prone to diabetes, that'll grow up. And when that goes up, that causes more inflammation. So when I see and talk to people who tell me that they're pre-diabetic or diabetes, a lot of them have symptoms of skin issues and or aches and pains, and that's because of inflammation. So let's look at the next slide. Autoimmune diseases. You know, where we live in this area, in this parallel, we tend to have a lot of autoimmune disease, and most of the time they're affecting women. So autoimmune diseases are those classifications of disease where our cells kind of turn on each other, and they don't necessarily affect just one area of the body, but sometimes multiple areas of the body. A lot of times if you're diagnosed with one autoimmune disease, usually there's a second or third that will pop up later in life. So those with Hashimoto thyroiditis tend to have a predisposition for fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue. And again, it is how the cells are responding to what we're eating, when we're eating it, how we're eating it, and also the chemical processes that go through our bodies at any given time. We have really good medications that are prescription that can help not only reduce inflammation throughout our body, but also help to modulate our immune system and block those pain receptors. And one of my favorites is called low dose naltrexone. It is a low dose. It has low side effects. It's very easily prescribed, and it's also a low cost medication. So I think that that's really important, and it works in young children and in older people too. Next slide. So when we're looking at low dose naltrexone, we try to keep it as easy as possible.
Michelle, I can't hear you.
Isha?
Michelle,
Yes.
are you? Oh, I can hear you now. I'm not sure.
Okay.
What
I don't know what's going
happened.
on. All right. All right. So where do I need to go back to?
Start at the beginning of this slide.
Okay. So when we're talking about low dose naltrexone, we try to keep it as easy as possible. So we see, oop, did it go forward? We go back. There we go. So it has very few side effects. So not only is it low dose, it is low side effect. It's also low cost. And it's used for a wide variety of indications, different types of arthritis, because it not only helps modulate the immune system, but also will block pain receptors, but it intermittently will block those pain receptors, same thing as if we use opiates. And in the little itty bitty doses, those microgram doses, we can actually help people get off of their opiates and even alcohol addiction. So we're using this medication in a wide variety of applications. Very easy for prescribers to prescribe, and we help make it easy by producing a wide variety of templates and dosing kits. Next slide. So it can help, and it does help not only a wide variety of inflammatory diseases, which most of these are autoimmune, but like I said, it is inexpensive. It's always compounded. There is a commercially available strength, which is a 50 milligram or 100 milligram tablet, but naltrexone works completely different at the higher doses of 50 milligram and above than it does at very small doses, like 0.25 milligram to 4.5 milligram. It actually works almost in reverse in some aspects. We see that naltrexone can decrease itching in the skin at very low doses as well, and we can use it topically for that reason. Next slide. This is all about low dose naltrexone and using ultra low dose as well. There's over 900 scientific articles and case study that have been produced over the last 30 years. It is a remarkable medication that not only helps heal the gut, but it helps to decrease inflammation throughout the entire body. It helps to decrease antibodies that are produced in autoimmune diseases such as Hashimoto thyroiditis or Graves' disease, And those are antibodies that can be measured by a simple blood test through looking at a complete thyroid panel. But what we also can use is when we're using micronutrient testing and also the 3x4 testing, we can then hone in on really decreasing the potential for additional chronic diseases to develop later in life, which I find very, very interesting. We continue to have a wide variety of seminar that focuses on so many different areas. And let's look at the next slide. Maybe that we actually talked about that. Oh, I didn't even talk about hormones, and here we are at 7 o'clock. Hormone balance is key. And I think that this is really important, especially when we're talking about gut health. Because not only does low dose naltrexone help heal the gut, the lining of the intestinal tract, but it can help balance hormones. And hormones are more than just estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Hormones are also classified as insulin, which is produced by the pancreas, and hormones such as cortisol. And even when we look at thyroid, specifically when all of those areas, so if you can imagine the endocrine system is the Olympic rings. So there's 5 Olympic rings, right? There's 3 on top and 2 on the bottom. Each one has a very different color. So if we look at maybe the sex steroid hormones, insulin and thyroid and cortisol and the neurotransmitters, so those are all 5 areas. They don't necessarily have to touch each individual one to interact with the other areas. So balance is key. Optimization of hormones is key. So if your test results come back and they're in the normal range, but yet they're at the bottom end of that range, that's not normal. That is suboptimal. It's kind of like, if you're running around with your gas tank sitting at full or 3/4 tank, you're not worried about where the next gas station is. You're not worried about your destinations and getting there. But when you get down to 1/4 of a tank, you're a little more concerned, right? Well, it's really no different about optimization of hormones. When we're running at the bottom end of normal, that means you're about ready to run out. And why do we have to wait until you run out to make changes and help you feel better? Through genetic testing and micronutrient testing, we can actually, and then saliva testing for hormones, or even dry urine testing to look at hormone metabolites, we can more specifically adjust doses for you at this given time, at this weight, at this cycle of even the seasons. Because I will say that when we're adjusting estrogen, progesterone, testosterone levels, sometimes the doses are different in the summertime than they are in the wintertime. And it has everything to do with activity, and it has everything to do with even vitamin D blood levels. But all of these are very easily adjusted when we test appropriately. And you'll notice that I didn't say a whole lot about serum. And the reason is because looking at serum, we're really not going to see a lot of hormone in the serum because it's not supposed to be there. It's supposed to be off in the target tissues. It's supposed to be where the activity actually happens. And the serum, or the blood supply, is really like a highway or a freeway. It carries cars from one destination to the other. So the blood will carry hormones from where they're produced to where they need to go, because that's where the activity is. So to try to capture a snapshot of what's going on I-5 at any given moment, maybe the hormone was just released, and so you see an overabundance, but yet that doesn't really signify what the reason is behind this laundry list of symptoms. We can see better results when we look at saliva and if we look at dry urine, because it will show us what's happening in the cells where all the activity is happening. I think that that's much more key, because then we can determine balance. Next slide. Okay, so we're back at stress. Oh boy, it's been a year, hasn't it? It's been very stressful for everybody, whether you've been shut in, whether you're a parent of children trying to navigate going to school, going back to school. But even just trying to weed through the truth and the science behind what's going on with the pandemic, stress happens at every point in your life. Whether your mom had a very stressful pregnancy, that child will be genetically changed. And that is just Paleolithic reasoning. That's just actually how it happens. But to be mindful of what's actually happening in your body at any given time will help you to decrease the stress and the effects of stress on your body. So here I've noted a couple of supplements that I think are very helpful. What I will also say is that when we're using supplements specifically for stress, it's very important to talk to your medical practitioner, talk to a functional medicine pharmacist or someone who's really in the know, whether it's a really good nutritionist, because not all supplements can be used when you have prescription medications on board. And sometimes those symptoms associated with stress can be a little confusing because you might actually need more hormone rather than more calming herbs, even though the symptoms are very similar. So you need to talk to somebody who's very well educated so that you can select the best medications for yourself so that you can find optimal health. You don't want to guess and rely on Dr. Google, because Dr. Google might send you down a pathway that might actually make things worse. And a lot of times people are like, oh, I tried that and it just didn't work. Well, maybe that wasn't the right medication for the right time. So we can always support those decisions for you. Next slide. Oxytocin is a hormone that we make in our pituitary. It is this amazing hormone that helps us to feel calmer and connected and warmer and just help us to feel calm and peace. We do compound it in a nasal spray, and it works very well for individuals who are not only breastfeeding, but also with depression and libido, and also for grief. Next slide. By the way, women make more than men do, so it's just kind of one of those things. Vitamin D, very important. So when I look at the core four, I believe that most people should be on a really good multivitamin, a good B complex, absolutely a vitamin D supplement, and good omega fish oils. And I say most people because, again, we want to tailor these specific products to you and what is necessary for you. I love magnesium. Magnesium is calming. It's a natural muscle relaxant. So if you're out gardening and you just kind of feel kind of stiff, kind of low in the back, or you found some muscles you haven't used for a little while, take a cup of magnesium. Oh my gosh, fabulous stuff. You'll feel great in the morning. It also helps to regulate blood glucose. So if you are diabetic, it really helps for that. My favorite is magnesium glycinate. And the reason is because the glycinate piece actually pops off when you swallow it and it dissolves in the stomach. And it helps to soothe the inner lining of the gut. So again, it helps to heal the gut. But then you get to absorb more magnesium. So less strength or less milligrams will actually produce more. Magnesium, if you take too much, it has this funny little side effect of causing diarrhea, but very few cases are being reported with magnesium glycinate causing that. It is mandatory, and I mean absolutely mandatory. So if you don't have enough magnesium, you don't actually conduct these chemical processes appropriately. And a lot of times they have to do with chemical processes in your brain to help build better gray matter, which is what helps with brain health and conduction of thoughts, but also muscle fibers, including heart health. Really, really important stuff. I think probiotics are very important, but again, they need to be perhaps rotated. I don't think people should be on the same probiotic for a long period of time. And we can test in the stool to see what's actually growing in your gut. Perhaps some of your symptoms are due to a yeast overgrowth. Maybe you've got skin rash, or you crave sugars all the time, or you have a skin breakout that look like psoriasis or eczema. Sometimes that has everything to do with the yeast overgrowth. Sometimes burping is a yeast overgrowth. And even having like a coated tongue or cavities can be controlled and caused by a lot of that. So we need to always take a look at what's going to be best for you and how long should you take them, and certainly how old you are and whether or not you have dairy intolerances. Some probiotics are grown with dairy, so that's not necessarily going to be your best friend. We can help you select better products. Next slide. These are some of the liposomal or oil-based supplements that we use for hormone control, but also to help decrease aging and also soothing the gut. The bottles that contain the liquids are usually kept in the fridge, but they can help with slowing down the aging process and also help to decrease stress and ensure that you have better health overall. Next slide. So what are the keys to success? The bottom line is we need to figure out what's going to work for you. So that's going to entail a conversation, finding out what you need to work into your daily routine so that we can make sure that whatever it is that you need, that it is given to you in a systematic way. So in other words, if you do the micronutrient testing, gut testing, 3x4, and you see that you have deficiencies in 5 or 6 different areas, well, we may start like what Toni said. We'll start with the top 3 and get you going on those. Because if we start with all 6 at one time, that might be really overwhelming. And we don't want you to 3-4 days later go, oh, this is too much. I just can't do that. However, if you really do need to supplement to fill in the gap for 6 deficient pathways, that's kind of like sitting in the middle of a 4-foot hole. So if you're sitting in the middle of a hole, are you going to use a garden trowel to fill that in? Or are you going to go get a great big spade or even a backhoe to fill that in? And that might be what's necessary for you, but it's all about what is best for you. This is a few teas that are very helpful. They're very delicious. They're all gluten-free. They're all packaged in non-bleached pouches, which I find very helpful. And I absolutely love the flavors that are associated with these. And they help support a wide variety of health concerns. Next slide. Happy chemicals, yeah, and how to hack them. So when we're looking at dopamine, serotonin, those are areas that if we don't get a handle on them sooner than later, the lack of those can actually lead to chronic issues. And again, that's the whole point of gaining some information, gaining knowledge, using information as knowledge to then make decisions for yourself so that you can move forward for a better you. Next slide. You know, we've had virtual teachers for a very long time, and I'm really happy to be amongst some of my favorite virtual teachers. If you have questions about any of the things that we discussed tonight, this was almost like a fire hose of information. And if you need to get a hold of Toni and you're not sure how to get a hold of her, you can always get a hold of us. And this is a few ways you can do that. You can look us up at makerscompounding.com. That's our main website. Our other website is theldnpharmacist.com. That's my personal email. You're welcome to find me there. And you're also welcome to call the store. Next slide. You can tune in next time where we will talk a little bit more about self-care. And the next slide will show us that the next seminar is May 20th, and we're going to be talking about chronic pain, which I think this talk tonight very easily transitions into the May 20th. And in June, we're going to talk about men's health. If you need a personal consultation, or if you'd like to talk a little bit more about vitamins and supplements, you can either order those on our website or you can get a hold of us. We're happy to help you in any way. And you can register for upcoming seminars. They're always free. And you can register at makerscompounding.com/webinars. So I can't thank you enough for being here tonight. and certainly let us know how we can help you. And in the meantime, take care and be well.